There is someone in your head right now who has no business being there. Maybe they left without explaining why. Maybe they were kind to you just often enough to make the unkindness feel like your fault. Maybe they said something 3 years ago that you still replay at 2 a.m. wondering what you should have said back. And the strangest part isn't that you think about them. The strangest part is how much more space they take up than people who actually treated you well. The ones who were kind and consistent and reliable somehow left barely a trace. But this person, this one specific person who gave you every reason not to care, they are still there. You probably assumed this was a personal failure, a weakness, evidence of something broken in you specifically. It isn't. What is actually happening inside your brain when you cannot stop thinking about someone who treated you badly is one of the most well-documented and deliberately exploited mechanisms in all of neuroscience. And once you understand it, you will never look at that person, or yourself, the same way again. It starts with dopamine, but not the way most people think. Most people understand dopamine as the pleasure chemical, the thing your brain releases when something good happens. You eat something delicious, dopamine. You get a compliment, dopamine. You finish something difficult, dopamine. Simple enough. Except that is not actually how dopamine works. Not precisely. Robert Sapolsky is a neurobiologist at Stanford University who has spent decades studying stress, behavior, and the brain. In one of his most cited lecture series, Sapolsky describes an experiment that changed how researchers understand the dopamine system entirely. When you give a subject something rewarding on a predictable schedule, every single time their dopamine system activates in response to the reward. Reliably, consistently, exactly what you would expect. But then researchers made one change. They made the reward unpredictable. Same reward, same subject. But now the reward comes sometimes, not always, randomly, unpredictably, just often enough to keep the subject engaged, but inconsistently enough that they can never be sure when it is coming. Dopamine activity didn't stay the same. It didn't even increase slightly. It increased by up to 400%, 400%, from the same reward. Delivered unpredictably instead of consistently. Your brain on an unpredictable reward schedule is not just more engaged than your brain on a consistent one. It is neurologically consumed by it. The anticipation of a reward that might come, that has come before, that could come again at any moment, activates your dopamine system more powerfully than a reward that always comes. Certainty is neurologically boring. Uncertainty is neurologically addictive. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it is the most powerful behavioral conditioning mechanism ever identified in neuroscience. B.F. Skinner discovered this in the 1950s, working with pigeons and levers. He found that pigeons who received a food reward every time they pressed a lever would press the lever a reasonable amount. But pigeons who received a food reward only sometimes, unpredictably, would press the lever compulsively, obsessively, far beyond what the actual food reward justified. They couldn't stop. Not because the food was better, because the unpredictability made the anticipation itself neurologically irresistible. The same principle is why slot machines are designed to pay out on a randomized schedule rather than a fixed one. A slot machine that paid out every 10 pulls would be less compelling than one that paid out randomly. The gambling industry understood intermittent reinforcement before neuroscience had fully named it. Now think about the person in your head. Were they consistently kind, consistently unkind, or were they unpredictable? Warm sometimes, cold other times, present occasionally, absent without explanation, just kind enough, just often enough, to keep you uncertain about what you meant to them and what was coming next. That uncertainty was not incidental. It was, neurologically speaking, the most compelling thing about them. Your brain did not become obsessed with them despite the inconsistency. Your brain became obsessed with them because of it. Every moment of warmth they showed you after a period of coldness hit your dopamine system like a slot machine paying out after a long dry run. And your brain, being the extraordinarily sophisticated prediction machine that it is, responded by dedicating significant cognitive resources to the project of figuring out when the next one was coming. That project is still running. That is the hum you cannot turn off. Helen Fisher, biological anthropologist and senior research fellow at the Kinsey Institute, has spent decades studying the neuroscience of romantic attachment and rejection. Her brain imaging research showed something that should reframe everything you think about why you cannot let someone go. When people who had been rejected by a romantic partner looked at photographs of that person, the brain regions that activated were not the emotional processing centers researchers expected. They were the reward-seeking centers, the same regions that activate in cocaine users shown drug-related imagery. Romantic rejection, specifically in the context of someone who is unpredictably available, does not deactivate the brain's pursuit of that person, it intensifies it. The brain reads the loss of an unpredictable reward source as an emergency, a problem to solve, a pattern to crack, and it throws significant cognitive resources at solving it, regardless of whether those resources will ever produce anything useful. This is why thinking about them feels so different from thinking about other people who are simply gone from your life. This is why the consistent, reliable people who loved you well left so little residue, while this specific person, the one who gave you so little of what you needed, took up so much room. Your brain was never measuring them by how well they treated you. Your brain was measuring them by how unpredictable they were, and on that metric, the one who hurt you scored extraordinarily high. Understanding this does not make the thought stop immediately. Neurology is not a light switch, but it does change what the thoughts mean. You are not weak for being unable to stop thinking about someone who treated you badly. You are not broken or pathetic or evidence of your own worst fears about yourself. You are a human being with a dopamine system that evolved over millions of years to pay close attention to unpredictable reward sources, because in the ancestral environment, unpredictable reward sources, animals that sometimes appeared at the watering hole, plants that sometimes bore fruit, social relationships that were sometimes warm and sometimes cold, were worth tracking carefully. Your brain was shaped by an environment where ignoring an inconsistent reward source could mean starvation. The modern version of that same system is just pointing itself at a person who happened to be inconsistent in a way that felt important. The slot machine didn't know it was going to be addictive, neither did they. Anna Lembke is a psychiatrist at Stanford and one of the world's leading researchers on dopamine and compulsion. She makes a point in her work on addiction that applies directly to this. The antidote to compulsive pursuit of an unpredictable reward is not willpower. It is not deciding harder to stop thinking about it. It is removing access to the stimulus long enough for the dopamine system to recalibrate toward a new baseline, which is why no contact, despite feeling like deprivation, is not punishment. It is neurology. You are not cutting them off because you hate them. You are cutting off the stimulus because your brain cannot recalibrate while it still has intermittent access to the thing it has been conditioned to pursue. There is someone in your head right now who has no business being there. Now you know why. The more interesting question is what you are going to do with that knowledge.